Back in the mid-1960s, President Lyndon B. Johnson, or LBJ, laid out this incredibly bold vision for America. He called it the Great Society. And really, it was one of the most ambitious plans for the country ever, a huge dream of prosperity and justice for every single person. But as we're going to see, this grand plan was really a tale of two very different strategies, with two very different results. I mean, you can just feel the sheer optimism in his words, can't you? This wasn't just about making the country richer. It was about elevating the very soul of the nation. He truly believed America could use its incredible wealth to solve its deepest, oldest problems. What a powerful idea.
And that brings us to the big question, right? If the idea was so amazing, why are we still arguing about it today? Well, to really get why the Great Society is so controversial, we've got to go back and take a look at the America LBJ was trying to change.
So, let's set the scene. It's the early 1960s, and on the surface, everything looked great. America was absolutely booming, but just beneath that shiny, prosperous surface, there was a completely different reality hiding in plain sight. This really captures the massive paradox of the time. On one hand, you had the affluent society, post-war America, suburbs popping up everywhere, families buying new cars, new TVs. But on the other hand, you had what writer Michael Harrington called the other America, where millions of people were stuck in this deep-rooted poverty that most of the country just didn't see. And this wasn't some small, fringe issue. In 1960, almost 1 out of every 5 Americans lived below the poverty line. Just think about that for a second. 1 in 5. That is a staggering number. And this was the challenge that Lyndon Johnson decided to take on, head-on.
So, how was he going to do it? Well, LBJ's big plan was really a two-part strategy. And understanding the difference between these two parts is totally crucial to getting the whole story.
First, there was the Great Society itself. This was the big, overarching dream. You can kind of think of it as the inspirational mission statement, right? Let's build a country with better cities, better schools, better health for everybody. Then, inside that huge vision, you had the war on poverty. This was the boots-on-the-ground campaign. These were these specific, targeted programs designed to fight poverty directly. And this is where things started to get a whole lot more complicated and where a lot of the controversy came from later on. But before we get into all the complications, it is so important to recognize that some parts of the Great Society were just spectacularly successful. And there is no better example than a program that millions of Americans still count on to this day. Let's talk about Medicare. It is, without a doubt, one of the most popular and successful government programs ever created. So the key question is, what made it work so well, especially when so many other programs struggled? The answer is all in its brilliant design. The formula for its success was just beautifully simple. The goal was crystal clear: get health insurance to Americans over 65. The benefit was universal for that group. If you hit 65, you were in. Simple as that. And that simplicity helped to get massive political support and made it pretty easy to roll out. It just worked. Okay, but the story of the war on poverty is completely different. It just didn't have that clean, elegant simplicity that made Medicare such a powerhouse. And, that made all the difference in the world.
You can see the difference so clearly when you put them side by side. Medicare's goal was super specific. The war on poverty? It was trying to solve education, housing, and jobs all at once. Medicare's benefit was universal for its group, but a lot of the poverty programs were really complex and targeted, and that created all this red tape and political infighting. It was just a much, much tougher battle on every single front.
And as if all that wasn't hard enough, a massive conflict on the other side of the world was about to cast a very long shadow over everything LBJ was trying to do at home.
The Vietnam War. As the war ramped up, it started to swallow a huge portion of the federal budget, not to mention all the political attention and national energy. You've heard of the guns versus butter debate? This was it, playing out in real time. The money and the political will needed for an all-out war on poverty were being shipped overseas.
So after looking at the sky-high ambition, the undeniable successes, and the really complicated struggles, what are we left with? What is the ultimate legacy of the Great Society? Okay, let's break down the key takeaways. First, you've got these monumental wins, like Medicare, that fundamentally changed American life for the better. Second, the war on poverty shows us that good intentions just aren't enough when you're up against massive complexity and outside pressures. And maybe the most important lesson of all is this:
Simple, universal programs often build way more support than complicated, targeted ones. Honestly, the arguments we have today about how to fix society's biggest problems are direct descendants of the lessons learned way back then.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. As we face our own huge challenges today, from healthcare and climate change to inequality, what can we learn from LBJ's incredibly ambitious experiment? How do we balance having a grand vision with a practical plan that actually works? That's a question that is absolutely worth thinking about.